So in today's blog, we're going to pick up where we left off with the bit of Charlie Parker vocabulary from Billy's Bounce. Let's just take a second to listen back to that and review. Remember, we were only working on the very first measure of that solo. Let's listen. If you haven't figured that little piece of material out, remember that we're in the key of F major, and it starts on so, do. See if you can figure that out. When I'm figuring out at first, I try to get, just a chunk at a time. I think one of the things that can be really intimidating about transcribing anything in general, but jazz especially, because there's so much personality and inflection that goes into it. One of the trickiest things about transcribing that I know that I was certainly afraid of is just the depth of material and the length. Most solos are, of course, more than one measure long, but we can always reduce it down into these more manageable chunks. A parallel that I came across recently while reading Anne Lamott's great book on writing entitled Bird by Bird is basically the story that the title comes from. Her brother was doing a school book report that, of course, he had had weeks and weeks to prepare for, but it came down to the night before, and he's sitting at the table. Anne and him and their father are just sort of looking at, this huge amount of material. He's supposed to do a report of all these different species of birds, and he has all this material he has to read, go through, and he's just, his hands are up in the air. And their father comes to him and says, the way that you have to approach this is bird by bird. Think about it. It's not the entirety of the history of jazz or the entire Charlie Parker solo. I guess I'm just sort of seeing the bird by bird to bird parallel. This is I didn't think about that till now. But you just take it one chunk at a time, as small a portion as you need. You could just work out, one note. If you find that first starting pitch, ba, listen to it. I think that's the note he starts on, ba. Ba-da. Oh, I've heard a lot of songs that involve that. It's that so to do 5-1. Ba-da-da, ba-da-da. You can find the notes that outline or line on those strong beats. 1, 2, 3, 5. And then fill in the rest. Use some chromaticism there. So that might take a second to figure it out. But if you give yourself a small chunk to deal with and break it down just a little bit at a time, you'll be able to take it. It's bird by bird with bird. There we go. Okay. So what we're going to do right now with this lick of material, this chunk of vocabulary, is we're going to try to figure out the way that bird maybe plays in a very unique way rhythmically, and how we can emulate that by figuring out maybe what it is and what it isn't. Jazz a lot of times gets talked about as having a heavy triplet feel or a rounded feel. And if you listen to Bird and compare it to this triplet feel, which we're going to do in a second, you find that the way that he plays is a little bit straighter. And the way that myself and our IFCM cohorts like to think about it is that jazz is more about the accents than necessarily trying to fit it into a grid of a triplet feel, triplet, 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 triplet. Because we're really trying to emulate the way that he did it, get the swing feel from the recordings and the accents. But we know what things are by what they aren't. And so if we try to put that into a triplet grid, or just that can be an illuminating exercise and something that we can work on with a metronome. So what I'm going to do right now, the way that most of us approach working with a metronome at first, and I know that I was certainly this way, is to put the metronome on all 4 beats. If we're working on a tune that's in duple feel or 4/4 time, and to think about accenting the first note of the beat. 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Where that can be problematic is that as we get more and more comfortable with the material, our tendency, we're kind of relying on that to give us the downbeat. And as we get this under our hands, we probably want to rush it forward a little bit unless we're already really cognizant of that time feel. Instead of... And so what we can do is, first off, try to outline more of a division of the beat. And this lines up kind of with a triplet feel, so we're going to see what that would sound like. 3, 4, 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a... Triplet, triplet, triplet. And already I'm hearing a little bit, it seems not exactly the way that Bird played it, but for the sake of this exercise, we're trying to line it up with this triplet feel. But that doesn't really do much in terms of kind of pushing ahead, because we still have that accent giving us the beginning of the bar. What we're going to do is we're going to play a little trick with our ears. I'm going to keep the metronome the same. And so for this exercise, I slowed down the original performance tempo to 110 beats per minute. I have this triplet division on my metronome app. And I'm going to hear the accent now as being the last division of the bar. And so in this case, it's going to be 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and 2, 3, 4. 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and 1, 2, 3. 3, 4. So what that does is that it allows us to anticipate that downbeat is coming and keep all of the beats leading up to it and their divisions a little bit more even. And so we're aware of that pulse. I learned a lot about this from one of my drum teachers, Nate Smith, the 80/20 drummer. So if you want to learn a lot more about this, check out his material. I'll link to it. So there is more on that from the drum realm. But we're trying to apply this, and using this as an exercise can be a great way to figure out, okay, how is Bird phrasing it? Is it really lining up with triplets? I don't really hear that exactly to be the case. It seems like what he's doing is a little bit more straight. So to hear this in the opposite direction, I suppose we're going to take the same concept, outline a division or a subdivision of the beat. If our big beat is right here, I'm going to see what happens if I phrase it maybe now with 16th notes. We're going to still keep that accent on the last division of the beat, and so it's going to be like 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and up. 1, 2, 3. Bo-da, bo-ba-da, bo-ba-da. Bo-da, bo-ba-da, bo-ba-da. And if hearing the metronome in that way is a little bit tricky at first, go ahead and place the accent on all of the beats of your measure. 1, 2, 3, and a 4, and a 1, and a 2, and a 3, and a 4. Bo-da, bo-ba-da, bo-ba-da. Yeah, so that's a tricky exercise to see, can you get on either side of that beat, but really line it up with your metronome accurately. And having that accent on the last division before every beat or before every bar can enable you to just get more comfortable really listening to the way that metronome is phrasing it. And then when you go back to the original source material, you hear maybe what he's playing is a little bit in between those two feels. Yeah, that's really interesting to compare it. So what you can do, now that you have this experience working with somebody else's vocabulary, is to try and come up with your own ideas and try putting it on a grid like this, 16th note phrase. So I might start off my idea the same way that Bird does, and then take it in a different direction. This is sort of inspired by that phrase. What happens if I put that in a triplet framework? Boom. It can be pretty challenging, but it's a really fun way just to check your time, see if you can do all of this. The big recommendation I would say that anytime you use a metronome, try to get it off of the beginning of your measure. And so especially working on doing some exercises where it's on that offbeat, the last division of the bar or the last division of every beat is really going to improve your time, get you away from leaning into the downbeat and rushing ahead, which is a common tendency as we learn material and get more comfortable with it. So we'll take this idea a little bit further next time.